it's Reagan, and today I'm here to bring you my August wrap-up. Now, August honestly felt like the longest month of my life. Like, I feel like it's been 2 months since I've done a wrap-up. Just so much stuff happened in August that it doesn't feel like it could all fit in 1 month. That being said, I actually did a lot of reading this month. I read 7 books. 7, which is the most I've read all year in a single month, which I'm really excited about. So while this month was busy and it feels like so much happened, I also read a lot, which makes me really proud of myself. But obviously it's gonna be a longer video, so let's just start because the first book I read this month was The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. Oh my gosh, this book was just absolutely incredible. There's a lot of hype surrounding this book, so I was a little nervous about jumping in. This follows our main character, Monty, who is a bit of a rogue, who's a bit of a black sheep of his family. He really just likes debauchery, he likes drinking, he likes gambling. And at the beginning of the story, he's about to go on a last hurrah with his best friend, Percy, and travel the continent as many aristocratic boys did back in the day before he has to jump into real life. The only problem is his best friend Percy, he's also absolutely in love with, which kind of makes a, 3-month-long journey a little more difficult. He's also joined by his sister, who he has a bit of a strained relationship with. The story also houses quite a bit of twists and turns, and we really encounter a lot of surprising, alchemy twists that I really enjoyed. Absolutely loved this book. First off, I flew through it, and as I briefly mentioned in the synopsis of the story, a lot of really amazing representation. First off, Monty, our main character, is bisexual, and as I mentioned, he's in love with his best friend Percy, so there is a bit of boy-boy romance in this story, and it is absolutely adorable. Like, oh my god, it was just so cute. It made my heart so happy throughout this entire story. But there's also a sexual representation within this novel. Also really good disability representation as well. So this book just has a lot in it, and it deals with it all really well, and it also has such an amazing action-packed story. It was just so good. This story is a historical fiction novel that has all of the wonderful, delicious things that the decade houses. Clothing, ridiculous parties, lots of gambling and alcohol. But like I mentioned, there is a really interesting twist that the story takes that I don't really want to spoil. I did really enjoy where that twist took us journey-wise throughout this story. I also really liked how Mackenzie Lee dealt with the sexual elements of this book as well. Obviously, our main character is bisexual, and we also have a lot of representation in the story, and she really contextualized all of that within the time period, but also wrote in a way that also made it incredibly relevant to our time period as well. It was just a very well thought out, well written story that I just thought was a whole bunch of fun. It was absolutely adorable. It had wonderful historical elements, and it really did keep me on the edge of my seat. And at the end of the day, I gave this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It was just such a fun ride. The next book I completed this month was The Thief by Megan Wallen Turner. I cannot speak today. This follows our main character Jen, who at the beginning of the story is in prison. However, he's granted clemency if he basically goes on a journey and steals an impossible thing for the king and the kingdom. However, this story is not as simple as that synopsis makes it out to be. There's a lot of political nuances, and it also has a wonderful level of folklore storytelling. This world is incredibly dense, and I feel like this novel only skimmed the top of it, and I really feel like in the next few novels we're going to be able to get a deep dive and really learn a lot about this world. That being said, I absolutely loved this story. I found Jen to be a hilarious main character, and all of the other characters present in this book as well were just really lovely to read about. Well, I mentioned that there's a folklore element, but there is an element of storytelling within the story itself, which just completely drew me in. I just thought it was such a wonderful touch that just made me feel in the world itself, like someone was telling me the story of the world in the story. It's kind of hard to explain, but it was a good moment for me, okay? At the end of the day, I really loved this first installment, and I can't wait to read more within this series. I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I just thought it was such a good book, and now I have the rest of the series, so I can't wait to continue reading. What I read this month was sent to me for review by Wednesday Books, who I'm working with for this video, and that is I Hate Everyone But You by Gabby Dunn and Allison Raskin. Gabby Dunn and Allison Raskin you might know from their YouTube channel, Just Between Us, which is one of my favorite YouTube channels. They're absolutely hilarious. So when I found out that they were writing a book, I was super excited to read, and oh my goodness, I was not disappointed by this at all. Now, this follows 2 best friends who go to college on opposite coasts, and this is a story of just their correspondence. So their emails, their text messages, as they basically settle in, kind of discover themselves, and deal with a lot of personal issues. Now, this is actually an Own Voices book ×2. As one of the main characters, Ava deals with a lot of anxiety and OCD tendencies throughout this novel and talks very openly about her past and her experience with going to therapy, which I found to be very refreshing as someone who deals with anxiety. We also follow Jen, who throughout this novel is kind of discovering her own sexuality. While she's not one that necessarily enjoys using labels, she does sometimes toy with the term bisexual. However, she does identify as queer. Those elements I thought to be very well done, and again, written from an own voices perspective, which I just found to be really, really refreshing, but also felt it gave the story a really strong authenticity to it as well. It just felt very, very genuine. This story, just right out the bat, is absolutely hilarious. Honestly, Jen and Ava are best friends that have no boundaries, and they talk about anything and everything from their first semester of college. You really, really follow and love these girls as they face trials and tribulations and discover more and more about themselves once they start college. This story, like I said, is told through correspondences, which I actually felt really worked. Usually I like that unique format, but sometimes it can fall flat. I did not think that was the case in this. I actually felt like the format itself really helped with the comedy element of it all. It felt very 21st century, didn't feel cheesy. No one was using text language that no one actually talks in. It just felt like a very genuine story. My only criticism with this novel is that we waited kind of a long time for a conflict to sort of arise between the two girls. When it did happen, I felt like it was resolved a little bit too quickly, which didn't really give me enough time to kind of get over the conflict, especially because I felt like one character might not have taken enough responsibility or considered their friend enough. But then again, friendship is a rather complicated thing. It is not 100% perfect all the time. That being said, I did really, really enjoy this novel. I thought it was super, super funny, and I also felt like it spoke to real things college freshmen actually go through in their first year of college, or their second or third or seventh year of college. It doesn't really matter. I found this book to be personally very relatable, and I really enjoyed reading it. And at the end of the day, I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. The book I read was actually an audiobook. Clay and I listened to Tina Fey's Bossy Pants as we drove up from Texas to Chicago, and I have to say we really enjoyed this. There's something incredibly soothing about listening to an audiobook on a long drive. I don't know, it's just very different from listening to music or even like comedy reels. You just kind of sit and take it in. Bossy Pants was released in 2007, 2008, and it's Tina Fey kind of reflecting on both her childhood and her earlier career successes up until about the 4th season of 30 Rock. I have to say I really enjoyed it. I'm a big fan of Tina Fey. I really like her work. I've really enjoyed 30 Rock a lot, and I also liked her appearances on SNL. She talked a lot about how she was Sarah Palin on SNL, and I thought those chapters were incredibly interesting. I personally actually liked her talking about the struggles of motherhood and kind of balancing everything with 30 Rock. I found that to be, I don't know, I found those chapters to be really interesting because I feel like it's hard to get mother perspectives of women being comfortable talking about how hard motherhood is, especially with balancing it all. This book was funny. It wasn't necessarily laugh out loud funny the whole time, but I also found that element to be rather soothing as I was listening to this for a very long period of time in a very small U-Haul. Today I did really enjoy learning a little bit more about Tina Fey and also some of her perspectives of where she was coming from in her writing, and I just found it to be overall very enjoyable, and I gave this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was the Proustopia book club pick of the month, and this month we read The Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell. I've already done a full non-spoiler review, which I will leave linked down below, because this book is a bit of a doozy to explain, but spoiler alert, I really did enjoy it. This is a story that we follow our main character Esta, who basically lives in a world where magic exists, but it's dying. All magic is contained within New York City, and it is contained quite literally by a barrier that prevents people, magicians, from leaving, and if they do, they die. Magic in this world is not so much like spells and wands, but more like a special ability. Think like X-Men. Esta's special ability is time. She can slow it down, and she can actually travel back in time. At the beginning of this novel, she is given a mission to stop the magician, steal the book, to save their future. She travels back to the turn of the century in the 1900s, infiltrates a kind of gang of magicians to steal this book from an evil organization that has been set from all of time to try to destroy them. From there, we follow Esta as she tries to steal this book, make friends and enemies along the way, and overall, it was really good. I wasn't kidding about the long synopsis, but I really enjoyed this story. First off, I actually have a lot to say about this, so I'm going to re-point down to my review, but the magic in this book I thought was quite interesting. I really liked how it was more centered around special abilities than spells. It was really interesting to see and try to guess what other characters' abilities were. Esta as a main character I thought was wonderful to read from. She was strong and spunky, and I also liked to see how her 21st century personality contrasted the 19th century world that she had to like go back to and fit in, and also see how people reacted to her, just because obviously obviously, because obviously she's not a woman that would normally live in, you know, 1905. So really great romance and action in this book. Overall, I just thought it was a really, really solid story that kept me engaged throughout the entire thing. It had wonderful atmosphere with this turn of the century, like eerie, dark New York City magic underground thing that I really, really liked. At the end of the day, I gave this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was really, really good, and I can't wait for the next one. Next book I read this month was Sparks of Light by Janet B. Taylor. This was sent to me for review by HMH Teen, who I'm working with for this video as well. This is the sequel to the Into the Dim story, which I also read when that came out a few years ago. If you're not familiar, the Into the Dim story centers around a time-traveling, like, society. We follow our main character Hope, who for her whole life didn't realize that she could time travel. Her family was a part of this time-traveling society. However, when her mother disappears, she goes back to her mother's ancestral home where she discovers this. She also discovers her mother is not actually dead, but in fact stuck in the 14th century, and she has to go and save her. This story is full of like competing societies, time travel, and just a lot of really great things. Obviously, as this is a sequel, I don't want to spoil anything for the first book, but I will say I really did enjoy the second book even more so than the first one. The first one I ended up giving like a 3 out of 5 stars. This one I'm giving a 4 out of 5 stars. Overall, I felt the writing improved a lot. I felt the plot moved at a nicer pace, and overall I felt like the characters' motivations and just the characters' actions themselves just felt even better than the first one. This was a very solid second novel in this series. I felt like it just expanded the world, expanded the characters, and I overall just thought it has some really great elements to it. One element that I just always enjoy reading from is Hope has a photographic memory, so she's able to like call on facts in really interesting ways, which is always really nice because she's always able to give historical context to whatever, you know, historical setting that they travel back to, or if she sees something, she could be like, oh yeah, this is what this is. And it just makes a richer storytelling experience, at least for me, a history nerd. Like I said, I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was even better than the first one, and I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. I truly think this is a very solid YA time traveling series. I'm also very partial to time traveling series. While they confuse me, I love history, so it's like, you know what I mean? The last book I read this month was Like a River Glorious by Rae Carson. This is the second book to the, I don't know, Glorious trilogy. This is a Gold Rush era story following our main character Lee Westphal, who at the beginning of the first book has a horrible tragedy befall her family as they are killed in her family home. She then decides to flee west dressed as a boy to make sure no one is suspicious that she's on a wagon trail heading to California. And the reason why she's heading to California and why she's also very valuable is that she can sense gold. And during the gold rush, as you can imagine, that can get someone in a lot of interesting situations. This, of course, is the second book, again expanding on where the first book took off. Again, I just really, really love Rae Carson's stories. She just has an ability to write such an array of characters that are all very different, but all have different types of strength. Again, we have interesting representation in this story that it is a gold era setting novel set in California, definitely a time dominated by men. However, in this story, we have a variety of different women represented in this. We also have men who are homosexual. We also have a lot of discussion on race relations in this novel as well. Impact of gold rush on Native Americans, and also talking about African Americans fleeing west for freedom. All of these things discussed, I just felt like made this book such a more well-rounded and realistic story. And I also really liked while Lee Westphal found herself into some very difficult situations, some very like heart-wrenching situations, she was constantly reminded with being like, yeah, but it could be way worse. You're still this. And it was like, yeah, oh my god, like her privilege was constantly checked in this novel in like the 1800s, and it was so good. This novel was just really, really, really good, and I just really, really liked it. I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars. Alrighty guys, there is my super long August wrap up. I read a lot of books this month, and I had a lot to say about each of them. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you soon with another one soon. Goodbye!